Today we're talking about data mining for the next guard that will be coming into SMITE. And no, I'm not talking about Yemoja, even though she's not out yet. I'm talking for the next guard after that, because we already have a lot of information that came into the game with the Yemoja patch. So SMITEDataMining.com had a further look into the files that came up with this patch, and if you remember one of the more recent data minings, there was actually already information on the new guard, but it was very, very little. And that was that this guard will be Heimdallr. He will be guard number 107, and he will be Norse, as most of you probably know. As for his job, he is essentially the Watcher of Asgard. He lives at the end of the rainbow bridge that connects Midgard, or the Earth, and Asgard, and he has all these abilities in terms of sight and hearing. He's very capable of noticing anyone coming in, basically. Based on his abilities and what we know so far, it seems that his depiction as SMITE will go beyond just that, which makes sense considering that he has to fight somehow as well. The first information that we have about him is that he will be a physical character. That very, very likely indicates that he's either going to be a warrior or an assassin. Some of you may be wondering why he wouldn't be a hunter. The reason is that Hi-Rez has specifically stated that they consider Olorun a hunter in his design. Even though he is a mage by class, he works like a hunter according to them. So therefore it's relatively safe to assume that we won't see another hunter all too soon. And according to the release cycle, starting from Set, our latest releases were an assassin, then Horus as a warrior, then Olorun as a hunter mage, Persephone as a mage, and now we have Yemoja as a guardian, so the next one would normally be an assassin or a warrior. Based on his lore, I thought that a protector would make more sense for him, so I would have thought that a warrior as a role is more likely for him, but at the same time some of his abilities and some of the things that he has don't necessarily indicate that, so I'm really not sure between those two classes just yet. And the first part of that is his weapon being a double axe. Now it's not explained if this is two axes or if he just has a big two-sided axe. This, in my opinion, would also be a factor for his class, because I would think two small axes are something that can fit better on an assassin, while one big axe is something that would make more sense on a warrior. This axe has an effect which just says X1 hits in area, which could mean that the first swing of this axe is AoE, possibly. But that's not the only weapon he has. I'm not sure how this second weapon is applied, or if it's just for the effects, or if he's holding it in his other hand at all times, or if it's a stance swap. Many options here, but he has a second weapon, which is the weapon Horn. And this is probably his signature horn, which he uses to signal things, which has two effects added to it here. One, it has Horn Circle, and on the other hand, it has Horn Cone. I could imagine that maybe this horn is only actually used in abilities and has these circle and cone effects there, but they use it so much in this kit that it has to be animated a lot as well, and therefore it gets its own weapon tag. Or maybe that he actually uses both weapons in some way. His basic attacks are more unique than that though. They also have something that is called a chained melee attack. It's not clear if this means it's some sort of combo or if it's just a non-standard chain. Now how we have some characters that have basic attack chains that always do the same damage at the same attack speed, like for example Bakasura, and then we have others like Kali that have quicker attacks with less damage. Or maybe there's more to it, maybe there's a completely different mechanic to it that gives him some sort of effect for chaining basic attacks. Another tag or another note that SMITE Data Mining added here is that they're not sure if it has projectiles. There is a mention for a projectile, but it looks like these attacks are melee. I would assume that if there are projectile attacks, then the projectile attacks are tied to the horn and the chained melee attack is tied to the axe, or he simply doesn't have a range attack. Maybe he has a smaller range attack as well. That's also possible. There's only one information on the passive so far. The passive has a way to somehow mark enemies. No information about what kind of effect this could have on the enemies, so it's kind of hard to speculate with this. Of course, this could have something to do with his horn as well, but it's really too little to go by. We also don't have information about his first ability at this point, but we do have a fair bit of information on the rest of the abilities. The second ability is a hit pulse. A hit pulse is what, for example, Freya has in her 2, in her Aurora Blade ability, where she has a way of activating and deactivating additional effect on her basic attack for each separate hit. I could imagine that this effect refers to the horn and the devil axe, so maybe this is the ability that allows you to swap between your weapons, maybe normally using the axe, and then for this situation you can swap over to the horn. At the same time, this ability seems to do more than just that, because it has another note that says cone pullback. We know that the horn will have a cone, so maybe it's tied to that in a way. It can also be cancelled by right-clicking or when it's interrupted. I'm not sure if this is maybe the animation where you change over to the pulse variation or what part of it can be cancelled. It also has a target effect which could be tied to a different range, but doesn't necessarily have to at all. I have a feeling if this is some sort of weapon swap, there is more to it than just swapping the weapon, which is also indicated by this cone pullback. So what I could possibly imagine is that maybe when you swap, you have an effect to pull an enemy towards you, and that kind of helps you to get enemies into melee range. With how unique most newer kits are and how little they typically rely on very basic mechanics, I can kind of see some additional effect coming into play here. Now let's look at the third ability. This deploys something called an auto portal. This triggers a cooldown of 5 seconds and has a delay of 2 seconds before firing the event. Additionally, there is a teleport, so the cooldown and fire event is probably the cooldown for transporting people or being able to transport yourself. And there's also a chance that it only teleports basic attacks, which could be some weird way to turn a melee basic attack into a ranged basic attack, but I would be surprised if that's the case. And it is also a deployable. Now, this teleporting thing is interesting, or this moving thing is interesting, and it might tie in with the next ability as well. So we'll discuss that when we've looked at that, because I could imagine some sort of mechanic in that regard on either of these abilities. The ultimate has a massive amount of effects compared to the rest. The first note is chain device, and this means that the ultimate is essentially a series of different events that will happen after each other. In this ultimate there is a tunnel and also some camera movement or camera changes. There is also a stun effect, and apparently the tunnel can make you into a charge, whatever that may mean. It could mean that it's somewhat similar to Yano's ult in that regard. The last event seems to be a charge, which stops on hitting a guard. Stage 1 and Stage 2 of this ability are explosions. The ultimate seems to be overall very epic or cinematic, with Heimdall having an intro and other things, so maybe similar to Apollo's ultimate, where you call down that chariot and then your camera changes, meaning you fly through the sky, you get lifted up and everything first. This ability has the following stages. Intro. So apparently if you have a victim for this ability, the intro plays with the victim instead of just Heimdallr, entering into a tunnel or something like that. And this tunnel then triggers the teleport. The second stage is some sections change visibility and a timer is triggered. If the timer is down, then there's a stage 1 explosion. Then there's stage 2, there is another explosion with some section changing visibility. It also does another teleport. Outro, the end camera changes, the tunnel changes visibility or similar. And stage 1 and stage 2 are 2 seconds each, so this is a relatively long ability. So it's safe to say there's a lot going on here, and it's a little bit messy at first maybe, but I can kind of think of things from multiple perspectives. On one hand from in-game mechanics, as well as from the lore side, how this could make sense. Let's start with the in-game mechanics. So we have Naja, who also similar to Apollo, has something with a fair bit going on in his ultimate, and then takes the enemy to the sky and basically completely isolates them from what's going on around them, changing the visibility, as it is the case in this ultimate as well, because you can't see anything around you. There's this visual effect around you, you get attacked in the air and then you drop back down after a while. So I think this is the direction we should be thinking in, something that takes someone out of the fight. But what's interesting in this regard is that it says if you have a victim. Now I'm not sure if this part was added by SMITE data mining or if it was actually in the data mining, but there could also be a possibility for this ability to be used without having a target, essentially using it as a temporary escape. Furthermore, there is a long requested mechanic in SMITE that has not made it into the game so far, which is people asking for a mechanic that allows them, or an ultimate rather, that allows them to pick a target during a fight and basically put them in a one-on-one arena where you have a few seconds to battle it out and then the survivor gets to go back, or who doesn't survive dies there. This would obviously be a very strong mechanic, which could also somewhat backfire on the user because the user would be the one using an ultimate just for this, whereas the enemy might still have their ultimate. And I could see Hi-Rez considering to add this with certain limitations, knowing that this is a mechanic that could also make the game rather frustrating for some characters. The big entrance of this ability with this tunnel and then these multiple stages that last for a while indicates to me that this must be something that happens with a single target that you can pick out and that kind of takes them out of the fight, but also should give you a way to fight, considering it seems that Heimdallr is either going to be a warrior or an assassin. But that's just the in-game mechanics part. The other part is the lore part that could very easily be tied to this. Heimdallr, as we've already established, is the watcher at the end of the Rainbow Bridge, the Bifrost to be precise. And this is this bridge between Midgard or Earth and Asgard. I couldn't really find much information on a tunnel that would somehow be related to Heimdallr, and I don't think there really is one, but there most certainly is this connection with this bridge, and I could easily imagine that this bridge is just labeled as a tunnel in in-game files, because really, in terms of the visuals, it might still be a tunnel, because you may have the Rainbow Bridge but then clouds surrounding it, so you can't see your surroundings while you're on this bridge. So what I could imagine is that Heimdallr takes a target on this Rainbow Bridge, they travel to another realm, potentially to Midgard, have a few seconds to fight there, or maybe the enemy just takes damage there, depending on how it goes, and then they return. It would make a lot of sense for the visual effects that we can see in this, and it would also very much fit in with his lore, with this being like one of his core aspects. I mentioned earlier that the third ability also has this auto portal, which could also kind of be this mechanic, but at the same time I think the whole effect with the Rainbow Bridge would be a lot more epic and a lot more overwhelming, so I think it would be a better fit for the ultimate. And that is all we know about Heimdall so far. I'm very excited to see how this all turns out, and I will of course update this if there is more information in the future. Feel free to subscribe and potentially click the bell to get the notification for that video when it goes up. And other than that, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope this was interesting and insightful. See you for the next one tomorrow. DukeSloth out.